If this story touched your heart, don't scroll away. Like, share, and subscribe to The Kindness Spot, where real stories remind us that compassion is stronger than wealth, and that a single act of kindness can change more than one life. It can change the world. The morning sun poured softly through the tall windows of St. Mary's Hospital, casting golden light across the pale walls and polished floors. Outside, the day had begun with its usual rhythm, cars honking, people rushing to work, lives moving forward. But inside the waiting area, time felt heavy, thick with worry and exhaustion. Amid the quiet hum of machines and murmured conversations, one sound broke through, a young mother's trembling voice. Her coat was torn, her shoes worn thin, and in her shaking arms she held a small child whose face was pale as paper. The little girl's stuffed bear dangled helplessly from one hand. "Please!" the woman cried, her voice cracking. "Someone help my daughter!" Her name was Marissa Lane, and her plea was not just a call for help. It was the sound of a heart shattering under the weight of fear. People turned to look, some with sympathy, others with discomfort. A few whispered, but no one stepped forward. In a place built for healing, compassion suddenly felt like a rare luxury. At that same moment, walking briskly down the corridor was Adrian Cross, a man whose name was often spoken with awe in boardrooms and business pages. Billionaire investor, philanthropist, visionary. His life was a calendar of meetings, flights, and decisions worth millions. He had come to St. Mary's for a brief meeting about funding a new medical wing through his foundation. To him, this visit was routine, another step in maintaining a polished public image. But fate rarely follows schedules. As he passed the reception counter, Adrian stopped. His sharp eyes, trained for numbers and negotiations, fell upon the woman kneeling on the cold tile floor. Marissa's sobs echoed in the sterile air as she held her daughter, Sophie, barely 3 years old, whose small chest rose and fell with weak, shallow breaths. The nurse behind the counter looked uneasy, repeating a practice line. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't begin treatment without payment." Marissa clutched Sophie tighter. "Please," she begged. "Take me instead if you have to. Just save her. She's all I have." No one answered. The nurse averted her eyes, uncomfortable but unmoved. The hallway, bright with fluorescent light, suddenly felt cold. Adrian's steps faltered. Something stirred deep inside him, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. The forgotten past. Adrian Cross was a man who believed in control. Every success, every deal, every dollar earned was built on discipline and logic. He'd long convinced himself that people shaped their own destinies, that failure was a choice. But as he watched Marissa cradling her dying child, he saw something that shattered that belief. Sometimes life didn't break because people were lazy. Sometimes it broke because it was merciless. He could have walked away. No one would have blamed him. But something in Marissa's tear-stained face, in Sophie's fragile body, pulled him back to memories he had buried long ago. Nights when his own mother had gone hungry so he could eat, years when hope felt like a luxury. He walked up to the counter. The nurse straightened, startled. "Prepare the child for immediate treatment," Adrian said firmly. "All expenses go under my account." The nurse blinked, uncertain she had heard correctly. "Sir, you don't have to." "I said do it," he replied quietly, but with a tone that left no room for hesitation. The staff hurried into action. Marissa looked up, stunned, clutching Sophie as if afraid the moment would vanish like a dream. "Why?" she whispered through her sobs. "Why would you help us?" Adrian glanced down at the small teddy bear in Sophie's hand, its fur worn from love and time. "Because no child should pay the price for what the world failed to give," he said softly. "And no mother should have to beg for mercy that should already be hers." A chance at hope. Within minutes, Sophie was wheeled into the treatment room. Doctors and nurses surrounded her, their faces focused, hands steady. Marissa stood in the hallway, shaking, as the door closed behind them. Adrian stayed beside her. His suit, hand-tailored and expensive, looked out of place among the plastic chairs and scuffed floors. But he didn't care. He simply sat down next to her. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel awkward. It felt necessary. Marissa could barely speak. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "I've tried everything. Every charity. Every person. I thought, maybe today someone would listen." Adrian nodded slowly. "You did everything you could. That's more than most." He didn't tell her that he saw his mother in her, the same fire, the same refusal to give up. He didn't tell her that he felt ashamed for ever believing success made him different. He just waited. Hours passed. The clock hands moved, but Adrian and Marissa barely noticed. Nurses came and went, voices murmured down the hall, and finally, a doctor emerged with a small, tired smile. "The treatment is working," he said. "Your daughter is responding well. She's stable." Marissa collapsed into tears, this time of relief, not despair. Adrian exhaled, his shoulders dropping as tension he hadn't realized he carried melted away. When Marissa turned to him, her voice was barely a whisper. "How can I ever thank you?" "You don't need to," Adrian said gently. "Just take care of her." Rebuilding lives. Over the next few days, Adrian learned more about Marissa's story. She had once been a bright student with dreams of teaching. But after Sophie was born, her partner walked out, leaving her with a baby, a pile of bills, and no support. Since then, she'd worked 3 cleaning jobs, often skipping meals so Sophie could eat. Poverty had taken her comfort, her health, and nearly her hope, but not her love for her daughter. Adrian listened quietly. The more he heard, the heavier his heart grew. He had built empires, yet somehow forgotten the struggles that had once shaped him. When Sophie was strong enough to sit up, Marissa brought her small daughter to see the man who had changed everything. The little girl smiled weakly and offered him her teddy bear. "Thank you," she whispered in her tiny voice. Adrian took the bear, his throat tightening. "You keep it, little one," he said softly. "Just promise me you'll keep smiling." But Adrian wasn't done. He met privately with the hospital director and his own foundation's board. Within a week, arrangements were made. Marissa would receive steady financial support through a position at his charitable foundation. It wasn't a handout. It was a job that recognized her strength and determination. He also created an education trust for Sophie, enough to ensure that when she grew older, no door would be closed to her because of money. When Marissa heard the news, she shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You don't even know us," she said. "Why go this far?" Adrian smiled faintly. "Because once someone gave my mother and me a chance," he said. "It changed everything. I think it's time I return that gift." Ripples of compassion. The story of Adrian Cross and Marissa Lane spread quietly at first, whispered among nurses, shared between staff, then retold by those who had seen it happen. It reached people far beyond the hospital walls. In a world often hardened by greed and indifference, this simple act of compassion reminded everyone that kindness still existed, and that sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. Adrian Cross, the billionaire once known for his ruthless efficiency, had rediscovered something more powerful than profit: humanity. Marissa, once invisible to the world, now stood with renewed strength. She returned to work with pride, her head held high, her daughter's laughter echoing once again in their small apartment. And little Sophie, once fighting for her life, grew stronger each day, her smile now a living symbol of second chances. The return of light. One evening, weeks later, Adrian visited St. Mary's again. He stood by the same glass windows where sunlight had first shone on Marissa's desperate cry. This time, he watched Sophie toddle down the hallway, holding her mother's hand. She spotted him and waved, her teddy bear bouncing by her side. Adrian smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes not from success, but from peace. He realized that wealth had given him power, but compassion had given him purpose. That night, as he left the hospital, the city lights flickered across his car window. For once, he didn't feel the usual rush to check his phone or plan the next meeting. He simply let himself feel gratitude, humility, and the quiet joy of knowing he had made a difference. Epilogue. The world didn't change overnight. There were still people suffering, still voices unheard. But sometimes, it only takes one act, one person choosing empathy over indifference, to start a ripple that reaches further than they ever imagined. For Marissa Lane and her daughter Sophie, that ripple became a lifeline. For Adrian Cross, it became redemption. As the sun set over the city, Marissa held her daughter close, her eyes filled with tears, not of fear this time, but of hope. Sophie's tiny hand rested on her mother's heart, her breathing strong and steady. And for the first time in years, Marissa whispered words she truly believed. "We're safe now."